Hey, everybody, this is Joe Joseph with your Daily Sheeple Daily News Brief, and I want to get started right off the bat with a great article by thedailysheeple.com, and this has to do with the U.S. involvement in Syria. And, of course, as you know, the U.S. has been involved for quite some time in Syria, and I've been talking about this at some length on my radio broadcast, but I want to bring this to everybody's attention that now, their media is really starting to play up the rhetoric and ratchet it up to get the propaganda going on that side as well, on the Russian side. Of course, we know that propaganda has been just through the roof with the election cycle here in the United States. And the Daily Sheeple reports that U.S. involvement in Syria could have nuclear implications, so says a Russian news anchor. And it says, a popular Russian news anchor, Dmitry Kizelyov, has been repeatedly warning that impotent actions by U.S. forces toward Russia could imply nuclear warfare. Following Hillary Clinton's rhetoric at the recent debate about controlling Syrian airspace as an affront to Russia and others in Washington accusing Moscow of war crimes, the relation between the political classes of the U.S. and Russia appears to be eroding. And I say appears because we really don't know what's going on and what the dynamic is. We know that down at the ground level, the cannon fodder, it's never good. The first thing I would like to say is whose place is it, especially the United States? It's not our place to go and force our will on another country. And I know a lot of people say, well, there's humanitarian issues going on over there. There's humanitarian issues going over there simply because we started it. We funded and armed all of these splinter groups that eventually formed ISIS, funded by the CIA, trained by the CIA, brought to you by Hillary Clinton and her cronies, and we shouldn't be over there. There should be a tremendous outcry right now in the United States that we're over there right now. The fact that there isn't is kind of discouraging to me. Now, I've seen a lot of the commentary on the Daily News Brief YouTube channel with regards to Russia, and I can tell you that they are going to protect their own interests. And right now, they're bound by treaty to protect Syria. Now, Bashar al-Assad, you may say what you want about Bashar al-Assad and his regime, but I can tell you that Syria had one of the most diverse religious cultures where you had Christians living with Muslims and everybody was singing Kumbaya. You had your normal strife, just like you do in the United States, but he had things pretty well glued together. You also had some of the most ancient civilizations and sects that were still speaking Aramaic. I mean, come on. This is crazy. They were totally destroyed by ISIS. And look at Hillary, look at that witch, and tell me that she didn't have a role to play in that. I mean, come on. When you take a look at what happened at the debate and a lot of the discussion going on afterwards, you can see that, the establishment is doing everything it can to justify not only its behavior, but to cast any sort of, quote, populism aside and call it crazy talk. And in reality, it's not crazy talk. Ron Paul talked about this extensively in 2008 and 2012, how this is blowback. A lot of blowback comes from us getting involved where it's none of our business. We arm these terrorist groups. We arm these splinter groups. We arm these rogue governments. And what happens? It blows up in our face every single time. And I hear the same rhetoric often with, well, you're an isolationist. How could you possibly endorse isolationism? No, the fact is I'm a non-interventionist, just as Congressman Paul was and is, and it has no place. Interventionism has no place in the way this country was originally constructed. Because you have to understand, we fought from an imperialist empire, and we were freed from the imperialist empire through bloodshed. Now, you look at what's happening today, and you can't have 1776 in our country anymore because of the fact that you just have such technology that exists that can wipe everybody out in a heartbeat. And they don't have to nuke us. I mean, look at the chemtrails. All they got to do is just change the spray, and it's game over. So you have to change the dynamic. Now, I saw some commentary yesterday on the YouTube, the comments, that said, well, what do? You don't offer any solutions. It's simple. Educate, 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 educate. That is how you do it. And the way you do it is getting to the children. You know, Congressman Paul did the same thing. He went to college universities. He wasn't preaching to the elderly or anything else. I mean, you're kind of falling on deaf ears there. You get the people that are the most moldable. And who are the most moldable? The children, the young adults. And they need it now more than ever. You know, as adults, and my generation and my parents' generation have been sorely negligent in ensuring that children are brought up in a proper way to ensure that you have that watchdog capability in place so that the powers that shouldn't be don't run amok. But that's exactly what's happened. People are so addicted now to their smartphones and to Pokemon Go and to all of these other distractions that they aren't paying attention to what's really going on. You know, the other thing that is interesting, too, is everybody, because of these smartphones, aren't applying it as they should. And I believe that that technology should be employed to where everybody is a citizen reporter. Now, we see a lot more of that, and it has totally marginalized a lot of the propaganda that's out there or their ability to spread propaganda, because if a false flag or something else goes down, there's instantly 50 to 100 videos that pop up instantaneously showing real footage and calling into question the events that happened. And that's exactly what we need, checks and balances. And that's not what's happening here with our foreign policy. It is totally and completely run amok. And that's what we need to do. Come on, folks. I mean, Russia and the Russian people are not the threat. They're not the threat. Our threat comes from within. It's our own rogue government controlled by special interest. That is who the threat is. The ones that don't listen to you, the non-representing representatives, those are the real threat. Those people right there. And, even with these leaked emails that have come out by Julian Assange, the Daily Caller, Alex Pfeiffer wrote today about these leaked emails about Saudi Arabia and Qatar also getting into the game with funding ISIS. And they will go on to say Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton sent an email to her campaign chairman, John Podesta, in 2014, who was then counselor to President Barack Obama, that said Saudi Arabia and Qatar are both giving financial and logistical support to the Islamic State and other extremist Sunni groups. This according to the recent WikiLeaks release. Remember, we don't necessarily have to funnel money to them, but we sure as heck can go ahead and sell the Saudis a bunch of weapons that they can go ahead and funnel on through, almost launder, if you will, to ISIS. That's exactly what's happening. Just like Hillary Clinton orchestrated the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, and where do you think his weapons went? Do you think they went to Libyan rebels and warlords? Maybe some of them, but the majority of Gaddafi's weapons and his chemical weapons went right over the border into Syria to help arm the Islamic State. And that's how they have their stranglehold on Syria. And we can't put up with that. That's why you have to educate people. Look, this is not hard to find. This is all available out there in the news, on alternative media sites like the Daily Sheeple, like SHTFplan.com. There are independent media radio broadcasts that talk about it all the time. TruthFrequencyRadio.com is a great place to go if you're looking for that kind of stuff. And you have to break free of your dependence on mainstream media. Now, I can tell you that the numbers indicate that people are, but there are a lot of people that still depend on the mainstream media for their primary source of news. And I can't understand why, because in all honesty, they've lost their credibility a long time ago. And I would much rather go to the most tinfoil of tinfoil hat websites and use my discernment than to give your Fox Newses, your CNNs, your ABCs, your broadcast media, even your main print media oftentimes will skew things. So you have to be very careful and use proper discernment. Now, the Daily Caller goes on and says Clinton sent the email on August 17th, 2014 to Podesta. It was an 8-point plan to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Clinton's email said that the United States should support Kurdish forces on the ground with U.S. military advisors and avoid the use of conventional ground operations. That's right. So instead, let's just fund and arm terrorist groups and paramilitary organizations in order to do that. You know, the other way that they also get away with this is by contracting. That way, they don't have to go ahead and send our military into harm's way. You just get organizations like Blackwater and even foreign contractors to go in and do your dirty work for you. And then you don't have to worry about saying, well, we're sending troops in. No, you send mercenaries in to get the job done. And oh, by the way, you know, they blend in a lot better. They don't have to wear uniforms. You don't have to worry about the Geneva Conventions. All that kind of stuff you don't have to worry about. There's ways around everything. If you want to know where missing trillions of dollars from the Department of Defense goes, you can start looking at contractors, especially these rogue or mercenary contracting organizations that go over and play soldier, because that's where a lot of the money is going. And we have problems here in the United States, things where our resources should be better spent. You know, we take a look at colleges right now. And I brought up this generation that's in school, very malleable. They are very receptive to things. They're getting the wrong gouge. They're getting the wrong information. And as a result, it's affecting not only their performance, it's affecting their mental health. You have kids and college students all over America looking for safe spaces. I mean, is that not the most crazy thing you've ever heard in your life? Well, now it's actually become an epidemic, I guess, in colleges across America, as students are flooding college mental health centers. And colleges from Ohio State to Central Florida are devising these plans to triage students to determine who needs therapy and who might need some peer counseling. Because I guess it's gotten so bad that, I don't know, they have to set up triage centers. That's crazy. Now, Andrea Peterson of the Wall Street Journal reported on this, and you can check out that article. And basically, it gets into the fact that, you know, these students are just not as prepared to be able to cope with the stress of college. Now, I went to college, and I can tell you that I don't understand where this stress is coming in. Okay, physics exams coming up, or you know, if you're a medical student or you're an engineering student. If you're an engineering student, you know that your life revolves around studying 24/7. It's study, sleep, eat, study, sleep, eat. That's what you do. But that's why when you get out, you tend to make more money, because it takes a higher level of person in order to become an engineer. It takes a higher work ethic to become an engineer. So, you know, the problem is parents aren't helping their kids in preparing them to be able to cope with the stressors of real life, nor is public education. If you take a look at public education today, it's a joke. They don't teach anybody what they need to know so that they can be successful adults when they get older and when they become, you know, responsible for themselves, or they're supposed to become responsible for themselves. They don't teach how to balance checkbooks anymore. That's gone. They don't teach cursive anymore, so you can't know what the founding documents say because you can't read it because it was written in cursive. That's a problem. U.S. history, not so much. Common math, now you got Common Core math that totally and completely scrambles their brains. You just don't have the real core basic. How about stewardship? Has anybody taught stewardship in the last 10 years outside of a private school or a homeschool co-op? I don't think so. These are things that need to be passed on to our children to ensure that they understand what personal responsibility is all about. And it's just not happening. And it's causing problems, not just as far as they are in their life with their mental health, but our economy is starting to take a hit too, as things are being farmed. All these jobs are being farmed out overseas. MichaelSnyder.com just reported during the coming economic crisis, 2/3 of the country will be out of cash almost immediately. He says, did you know that almost 70% of the U.S. population is essentially living paycheck to paycheck? And he brings up this survey that found 69% of all Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. Out of everybody listening today, how many of you have less than $1,000 in savings? I can tell you, it's because you don't have the opportunity that you once had here in the United States. 94 million people plus are out of the workforce. How can you have a thriving economy with that many people out of the workforce? And in fact, Michael reports that the total household debt in the United States now exceeds $12 trillion. So many Americans are so busy just trying to pay off their existing debts that they can't even think about anything for their future. If economic conditions remain relatively stable, the fact that so many of us are living on the edge probably won't kill us, but that moment that the economy falls off a 2008 cliff, bad juju, bad juju. And if you are living paycheck to paycheck, you live under the constant threat of your life being totally turned upside down. And there's a very real chance that that paycheck could go away. You know, during the last crisis, millions of Americans lost their jobs very rapidly. And if you remember, Congress went and enacted an extension of unemployment benefits. Some people were on unemployment for over 2 years. Over 2 years, they couldn't find a job. It's not because they're losers. It's because there weren't any. I mean, what can you do? Here you go. You might be work in construction or manufacturing, and all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under your legs. Do you think 7-Eleven and making coffee is going to pay the mortgage? Is it going to pay your electric bill? I don't think so. You know, and unfortunately, it appears that we haven't learned enough or learned anything from the last go round. As a matter of fact, they're employing the banksters and their other Wall Street cronies are employing the same type of tactics that were post 2008, you know, with the bad mortgages, easy credit, all that kind of stuff, because that's the only way you can have growth in this country. You can't have it anymore. People just don't make enough anymore. The living wage is stagnant. Cost of living's going up. It's crazy. You want a good example of what happens here in the United States if we keep going down this track? ReadyNutrition.com. Tess Pennington wrote a great piece, Bartering to Eat, how people on the streets of Venezuela are surviving. And she writes, Venezuela truly has become a nightmare come to life. What has taken place over the last 3 years has been nothing short of a total destabilization of their entire economy. The water system, the roads, the electrical grid, the hospitals, and especially the food distribution system. Venezuela has become so desperate that they're forced to scrounge for food in dumpsters and hunt down cats and dogs, and crime has become so rampant there that the capital of Caracas now has the highest murder rate in the world because people need to survive. You know, this is the craziness that's going on in Venezuela, and it can come to the streets of the United States if we don't pull our heads out of our butts and do something about this. Now, I can't tell you that Trump is going to solve problems. I can tell you Hillary's certainly not going to do it. I can tell you that typically when you vote for a Republican Party or a billionaire, you're typically not going to get that result because he's going to do whatever it takes to help his bubbas out and maintain his stellar image. The only thing you've got going for Trump is that he's a New York sneaky snake. And New York sneaky snakes sometimes don't play well with the establishment. So that's probably the best thing you got going for it. A Gary Johnson, a Jill Stein, they'd be great to get in there. However, you got to get Congress behind them. And Congress is corrupt. Congress is corrupt. The Clintons are corrupt. The U.S. election system is corrupt. The problem is education. The way to solve it is through the kids. Get to the kids. Get to the college students. Educate. Send them documentaries, you know, like America, Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo. Great documentary to show the fraud of our monetary system and the fact that, hey, there is no law in the books to pay income tax. Why are we all doing it? Let's have a come to Jesus moment. Ask ourselves the critical questions, use some critical thought, and get to the kids. And hopefully within a generation or so, we can have this turned around, but it's certainly not going to be overnight, folks. I'm Joe Joseph. This is your daily news brief brought to you by thedailysheeple.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, The Daily Sheeple, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much, everybody.